Day weekend. Lindsay, how was yours?
It was good. I just chillaxed with the family, had a nice time. What about you?
Same. I actually didn't do a whole lot. I was just here, didn't go out of town, and yeah, it was pretty chill weekend. I played more video games than I care to admit.
We're gonna have to talk about video games
It was
later.
a little too cold outside for it was nice out, but
We're looking for 80 degrees and plus, right?
That's what we want.
That's what we want. It's
Did
coming
finally make it to my rooftop pool for the first time in the season last night. So
soon. Okay, you didn't tell me you had a rooftop pool, so.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, listen.
You're welcome
besides,
anytime.
I was about to say, besides the rooftop pool, what's on your radar?
Let's get to it. Well, is the media actually paying too much attention to former President Joe Biden's advanced age and cognitive decline and the failure of mainstream journalism to uncover this story? I mean, the answer to that is obviously no. It's laughable, really. But the subject is front page news right now because the mainstream media's complicity in efforts by Biden's inner circle to suppress the truth from the public for weeks and months and maybe even years. They tried to pull a fast one on the American people and they got caught. Now some journalists are finally, reluctantly discussing what was really going on, like Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, authors of the new book Original Sin, which I started reading over the weekend, which unmasks the conspiracy to keep Biden's cognitive decline a secret from the American people. But one commentator at MSNBC thinks what we should really be talking about is the advanced age and the health of President Donald Trump. Oh, seriously, in a recent interview with Thompson, the co-author of Original Sin, Ayman Mohyeldin said that he thinks there's a double standard at play, that there's too much coverage of Biden's health and age compared with Trump. I'm not kidding you. He actually asked Thompson why Thompson wasn't covering that story more aggressively. Watch this.
If you take the lessons learned from the book, both about where the country is on having elder presidents and, more importantly, where the media is there a double standard in which, in a way, the way the media covered Joe Biden's health versus Donald Trump's health during the campaign? And certainly now, is there a double standard with the way we are covering it? I mean, are you out there also investigating and reporting about Trump's health in the same rigor that you did this book?
Thompson responds that he would be happy to look into that subject in the future, but he's a little busy with the Biden book right now. Look, if there was some kind of double standard here, if Trump's age and health and mental state were undercovered by the media, well, yeah, that would be a fair point. But the double standard worked the other way. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the situation. The mainstream media covers Trump's health from a skeptical perspective with great frequency. The media all the time proclaims Trump's statements are characteristic of some kind of mental decline. They comment on his age, they imply he's losing energy and stamina, that his mind doesn't work. They've been saying this for years. Liberal media and Democratic legislators even talked of invoking the 25th Amendment, a provision for removing the president due to health reasons. Representative Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat, introduced a resolution calling on psychiatric professionals to interview Trump and judge his ongoing fitness for office. And she introduced that resolution, all the way back in 2017. That's how long this has been top of mind for Democrats. Here's the key difference between Trump's health and Biden's health. We, the American people, get lots of exposure to Trump, and thus we can judge for ourselves. Biden, on the other hand, was hidden from us. This is quite an important distinction. Trump does interview after interview. He goes on 3-hour-long podcasts. He sits down for interviews with both friendly conservative media and also hostile liberal media. He spontaneously takes questions from the press at events, and so on. Biden, on the other hand, has done fewer press events than any other president in recent memory. He was deliberately kept at arm's length in order to mask his cognitive decline. In the 2020 election, his team used the excuse that the COVID-19 pandemic necessitated a different kind of campaign, and so they largely got away with it. Not so in 2024. Now, it's true that Trump is old, and by the end of his term, he'll be older than Biden is now. The media should continue to cover the implications of that, but I'm sorry. That's not a double standard here. Rather, let me rephrase that. The standard is different because the circumstance is different. Biden was cognitively impaired in an alarming and unprecedented and noticeable way. The American people knew it, Democratic officials hid it, and mainstream media looked the other way. And as I said, I've just started getting into the Tapper-Thompson book. I think it's pretty good, by the way. I recommend people, even if they think they know this whole story, should check it out. A lot of fascinating detail on the Biden family and how his inner circle worked to protect him. in a very, not even a cult-like way, it's almost like more of a mob-style way. And also, it just becomes clearer and clearer that the COVID pandemic was a gift to the Biden campaign because it allowed them to have an excuse to not do the vigorous public-facing kind of campaign that would have been expected under other circumstances, and that really worked to his favor. But you can't tell me that the media doesn't ask questions about Trump's health. We've heard these from the start, that he's deranged and thus he shouldn't be able to serve as president. That's what the media has said. That I've seen CNN segments about invoking the 25th Amendment against Trump, 8 years ago.
Listen, Biden's team is not lining my pockets. I'm not here to be in defense of Biden. I'm all for younger, sharper minds. I want to tell you that Trump is not that, right? He is the face of instability and knee-jerk reactions. He reacts off emotions often, saying stuff out loud sporadically, reposting AI images that are unreal. That's something that your grandpa would do that doesn't know how to use social media. Might be a little bit, okay, grandpa's losing it, right? So I think the whole world wanted somebody younger and fresh in office. There were a lot of studies and polls that showed that the American public would have preferred two different candidates to be running against each other for last year's election. But I do think that it's important to not take your foot off the gas, right? If you correct a problem, then we need to make sure that we correct it for good. And so the problem was that we didn't cover Biden's age enough. I hear that argument and receive it. But Trump will be 83, close to 83 by the end of his term. And he is not the poster child for stability. And I think that has to be recognized because we brush it off as brash or that's just Trump. And I think that some of that is irrational and getting older and not having any couth. And some things that he does are falling in line with people that are getting older that you really can't reel in. And we all have experienced that with elder people that we come across, are friends with, but they're not running our country.
I just don't see much evidence that it's fine, if you don't agree with Trump, to characterize him as unstable or the policies unstable or the rhetoric unstable. That's fine if that's your view. I certainly don't like every single thing Trump does or says. I just don't see that that's having to do with some kind of age-related decline or cognitive decline. I think that is just who he is. So it's similar to what he said for 8-10 years.
No, there's examples like, so he was on News Nation, our sister station. He was on News Nation, and Stephen A. Smith asked him about his attack on Harvard, and he starts responding about how black people support him and Harvard, and it had nothing to do with the answer and the question that Stephen A. Smith asked. And so that is the same thing that when we listen to these Biden tapes, his answers had nothing to do with...
I hate to break it to you, but if you ask politicians tough questions, they pivot to something else.
Oh, that...
Right? I don't know that that's...
You're making excuses
no,
for him.
I'm just saying it's not age. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying I don't think it's related to age or decline. Sure, he doesn't directly answer questions he doesn't want to answer, nor does any other political figure at any time. You ask them questions at those debate stages, they just pivot to attacking someone else or what they want to answer.
In an interview, then you criticize her in a 60 Minutes interview as taking too long and not answering a question. Maybe not cognitive decline, but you just say she's not a good...
I don't think Kamala Harris is, to be clear, experiencing any kind of cognitive decline.
But if Trump dodges the question and doesn't even take a breath but just answers the wrong question, that's not a little bit... something that's questionable to be looked at.
Look, he is old, and you're right that people in both parties worried that about these candidates and wanted different candidates. You are right about that. There were poll findings that America wanted two different candidates. But the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is the Republicans held competitive primaries. There were other candidates. There was Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Mike Pence, Chris Christie, others. And the Republican voters said, no, Trump, please. And so we ran that experiment. On the Democratic side, you didn't do that. Biden said, no, I'm running, and if anyone else tries to run, we'll have them killed. He didn't literally say that, but that was the attitude of his surrogates on cable news. And so there was no system, and so was him, and then this happened.
Well, Republicans got what they wanted. They got Trump in office, so we'll just watch that cognitive.
And then soon we'll have this is Trump's last election, despite the whole third-term stuff, and then...
We'll see what happens.
We will have a new apprentice, one far younger and more powerful.
Hopefully, unless it's Bernie Sanders. Next up, President Trump says that Putin has gone crazy. We'll dive into that next.
President Trump says that Russian President Vladimir Putin has taken things too far.
The past weekend, Russia launched its largest-scale missile and drone attack on Ukraine since the start of the war. The attack killed at least 12 and injured dozens.
Trump told reporters this on Sunday. I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people. I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. He's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all. The president continued airing his complaints on Truth Social later the same day, writing similar comments. Putin, has gone absolutely crazy. I've always said that he wants all of Ukraine, not just a piece of it. Maybe that's proving to be right, but if he does, it will lead to the downfall of Russia. Likewise, President Zelensky is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does.
Russian spokesman Dmitry Peskov responded to Trump's complaints on Monday, telling reporters, quote, "We are really grateful to the Americans and to President Trump personally for their assistance in organizing and launching this negotiation process. Of course, at the same time, this is a very crucial moment, which is associated, of course, with the emotional overload of everyone, absolutely, and with emotional reactions."
Fox News' Brit Hume wrote on X, "We're glad to hear President Trump say this, but Putin hasn't changed. He's always been a brutal tyrant."
Meanwhile, editor-in-chief of Midas Touch, Ron Filkowski, wrote, "It's not Zelensky's war or Biden's war or Trump's war. It's Putin's war." Why can't Trump simply say that? Why is he obsessed with blaming everyone else? It's a simple and obvious truth that should be stated with moral clarity. Amen.
Well, yes, it is Putin's war. Putin initiated the war, and that was wrong, and he shouldn't have done that. And I don't think there's been much equivocation about that. It's not about who is at fault. Yes, Russia is at fault, or specifically Vladimir Putin, and the Russian people are at fault.
But it is about who's at fault, because the way that Trump
about how to end it.
Well, the way that Trump presents it is almost like Ukraine is the aggressor and Russia's the victim. Like even in the statement, people in his party are looking at the tweet or the statement on Truth Social and like, well, the first half was good, but the second half when you started berating Ukraine again was unnecessary.
Right, we're not allowed to criticize Zelensky.
No, but why, though? Our position should be to create a stalemate between Russia and Ukraine so that we can help Europe get what it hopes is that not allowing Russia to take 20% of Ukraine and leave them unprotected. Like, Europe is actually our ally, and they don't want this to happen. And so we shouldn't create a situation where we say, yes, Russia, what do you want on the table? What are the list of demands? Let's give that to them, because that's just caving to a dictator. I don't think anybody wants that to be the solution. And I think for somebody who went on the campaign trail and said 53 times, there's been several people that have counted 53 times that I am going to end this war in 24 hours, is what Trump said. And even if he said I'm doing it in jest, it doesn't make sense, because you say it 53 times and then you say you're saying it in jest when you get interviewed about it 5 months later when the war hasn't ended. It's because you have no plan and Putin is making a mockery out of you. And even though you talked to him for 2 hours last week and said you had a great, brilliant conversations, negotiations will start, quote, immediately, nothing has changed. You talked to him in February. Nothing changed since then. And so here we are in the same cycle where Putin is laughing and doing whatever he wants, and we're doing absolutely nothing.
Well, bringing this conflict to an end now is more, it gets more and more difficult because Russia does have the upper hand. They have significantly degraded Ukraine's ability to fight back. They've killed hundreds of thousands of able-bodied soldiers in Ukraine. Ukraine now, even with our assistance, with us sending them money and weaponry, who is still alive to actually wield weapons. They're conscripting people outside normal military age because their fighting force has been decimated. The reality is that Russia is winning this war, slowly conquering Ukraine, and the longer it goes on, the worse situation it gets. So then maybe from the Putin standpoint, why do I even have to negotiate? I'm about to control the whole country.
No, well,
that is an argument for having had negotiations earlier, for having done the opposite of what Joe Biden said, which is what we would defend Ukraine to the last man, no matter what. We'll give them anything they need to fight back against Putin. That was a bad strategy that obviously was going to get Ukraine in this position, where now they have almost no bargaining position because there's nothing they can do. Their country is being slowly conquered. I think that's very bad, to be clear. But what can we do? I think Trump is doing his best, given the situation, to arrange diplomacy. Maybe he overpromised.
Best.
Well, what else can he do? You're right that he overpromised by saying he could end it in a day. That did not end up to be true. I wish it was true. I think we all wish it was true. He is trying to engage in diplomacy between these two countries, but Ukraine still has a somewhat naive view about its ability to eject Russia from the country and keep control of all Ukraine. That's totally a fantasy and it's never going to happen. And Russia has the view that we don't really need to negotiate that much because worst comes to worst, we're just going to keep fighting, killing, and taking control of their country.
At the end of the day, this costs Russia a lot of money. So we need to understand that it's not just like a walk in the park for the country. Okay, it's costing them a ton of money, as well as the fact that they are planning.
An eyelash at that.
But I mean, they're scaling up this summer and still planning on
matters.
doing more attacks this summer, according to reports that I'm reading. And so on top of that, we approved $3 billion in funding for Ukraine during Biden's term that has not been shelled out to Ukraine yet. And I think that that also is problematic because where it was a stalemate a little bit, where Ukraine was pushing and fighting back for themselves, now they're not equipped and only relying on Europe when the U.S. should also be an ally in this fight and help them stay sustainable, because at the end of the day, Russia's going to stop fighting at some point and decide, let's just call a spade a spade, no one's winning here. We're at a standstill, and then that would be favorable to Europe, which is our ally.
Look at the history of Russia. I mean, when the Nazis attacked Russia, they were willing to lose millions and they throw like cannon fodder. They threw their people at the Nazis to stop them. When when Napoleon invaded Russia, they burned every city and just retreated. The desperate acts of self-harm that country has been willing to resort to win military conflicts through sheer willpower, through willingness to sacrifice and lose and die, it's not something that should be taken lightly. And I see a lot of this in this conflict. I don't think our economic sanctions are having very much effect. And then Europe is still taking Russian energy. So if, again, I say this, I come back to this time and time again, if Europe thinks this is such an existential threat, then I think the measures they would be taking against Russia should be stronger. The fact that they're not taking stronger measures suggests to me that they think, while this is bad and inconvenient, it is not an existential threat to Europe's own survival, because then they would be throwing more of an effort at it. It's more of a rhetorical or moral point, they don't actually think Russia is going to invade the rest of Europe. But I want to bring it to an end. We should continue diplomacy with Russia and Zelensky. It's not about blaming Zelensky or blaming Ukraine. There is a strain of that I think is wrong and silly and unhelpful. But we have to have negotiation, and we have to have Ukraine willing to lose part of its territory, or else it will lose the entire country. Those are the two options.
And I think
right?
that
I don't hear an argument that there's going to be some other option.
I'm worried that we lose respect on a world stage because of the way that Putin has been mocking Trump by all standards, by both parties, to other leaders around the world. The way that Trump spoke about their relationship to what is actually we know to be true now. There was no one who was confused that nothing would change after their phone call last week besides Trump. And so that's the problem to me, is that he could have led with a different dialogue that doesn't criminalize Ukraine, that allows them to continue to be the victim and try to figure out how they can win in this fight, as opposed to just trying to blame them and say, y'all figure it out. It has nothing to do with me.
Well, Trump doesn't like being made a fool of, and he's not happy at all with Putin, so maybe that will reflect a different diplomatic posture from the U.S. Next up, Trump has also greenlit the U.S. Steel Nippon Steel deal in a surprising announcement that's only a day after the U.S. Steel Workers Union asked him to block it. We'll discuss. Stay with us.
President Trump has greenlit a deal for Japan's Nippon Steel to buy U.S. steel, a move that reverses his campaign position, rejecting the transaction. The deal comes one day after the U.S. Steelworkers Union urged Trump to block the bid.
President Trump writes of the deal on Truth Social, "For many years, the name United States Steel was synonymous with greatness, and now it will be again." He also said the deal will create at least 70,000 jobs and add $14 billion to the U.S. economy. Now, as a reminder, former President Joe Biden blocked that transaction just weeks before leaving office in January.
U.S. Steel also put out a statement on the news, writing, quote, "U.S. Steel greatly appreciates President Trump's leadership and personal attention to the futures of thousands of steel workers and our iconic company." Others on social media were not as enthusiastic about the news. Former Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown says the deal is, quote, "a betrayal of American workers." So both Biden and Trump initially opposed this deal, and
As
so
did
now
Kamala
Trump,
Harris and J.D. Vance.
right? Everyone did, and so now Trump is doing a 180. That seems like a flip flop, no?
Well, he did a 180 to the position I think is correct, so I'm glad he did it. I support this. I think it's a no-brainer. I'm actually I'm resentful. And what business is it of the federal government if one private company sells or makes some business arrangement with another private company? This is not a national security issue. If it was a Chinese company or something like that, this is a Japanese company. Japan is an ally of ours, so you can't come up with some convoluted national security reason not to do it. This will add jobs. It will add value to our economy. It is not the business of the government to get into the minutia of what company does what, absent some national security rationale. Joe Biden was absolutely wrong to block it. Trump was wrong to say he didn't want to block it. I'm glad, but he's a deal maker. He knows this is a great deal for the U.S. economy, for creating jobs. It's a no-brainer. It's great. It will make everybody better off. I'm glad he switched his mind on this. And it shows the limitations, I would say, of I know workers and unions are increasingly part of the Republican coalition, and it is important for them to feel like they're getting something out of Republican policy now, which has traditionally not been super worker-friendly. But we cannot just halt all economic progress in this country to appease a special interest, a labor union. This will create jobs. I mean, some unions have interest not in creating jobs and protecting their own jobs, right? They don't want more jobs in this industry because there's more demand for them if they don't have to face competition. Competition is not always good for individual workers and individual firms, but it is good overall for the health of our economy and, most importantly, for making prices come down. We're all so concerned about inflation. Steel is what you use to build all sorts of things. To build houses, we need steel. So we need steel to be inexpensive and readily available so we can have a great nation once again, economically in a lot of other senses. So this has to take place. It's good. Good done.
I don't know if it has to take place. I think if you're talking about special interests of American people, and then you're talking about foreign influence of Japan buying a U.S. company, then what do we prioritize,
It's
right?
a Japanese firm.
I know, but it doesn't matter. What do we prioritize? If Trump is so America first and American employees are telling him this is not what we want, who actually are going to be the ones that are going to be benefited from the raise and all the investment that they have promised, not on paper, verbally to Trump that they're going to do as a Japanese company, we'll see where it lands. This all could just be talk. I mean, leaders promise things all the time that don't come to fruition. But also, I think, the president of the United Steelworkers said it bluntly, and I think that everybody should understand. He said, Nippon has a long and proven track record of violating U.S. trade laws. That's why he doesn't want this. The deal would end or erode domestic steelmaking capacity and jeopardize thousands of good union jobs, right? Unions are there to protect American workers. So I wouldn't call them special interests. I would more call them looking at the entire deal, people who've been working in this for years and saying this doesn't work for us. So perhaps instead of just making a decision because some country is promising you something and you're mixing in your tariff conversations with this and trying to get a win, maybe talk to the people that it affects most and make sure that they want it since you are the president of quote unquote America first.
And this is going to come down to a very fundamental political difference between you and I, or between right and left. I don't think government policy or economic policy exists to serve just the interests of a specific subset of the labor market. I certainly don't think the government should go out of their way to harm people in this way. And I know that, again, national security conversations need to take place, particularly with respect to China. But the bottom line is, we can't just build everything in America, even if that would be good for some small number of the labor pool. It'd be more economic opportunity for them. If they can derive that naturally, that's fine. But the government can't restructure deliberately the economy to do that, because it'd be wildly inefficient, make everything more expensive, and then it's an interconnected economy. We're not all just laborers in one specific sector. And so you can't just consider the interests of those people, because then you would harm everyone else.
Well, that's
all
exactly
need
what
things
Trump
to
is doing with his tariff policy, right? He's considering that everything needs to come back to America.
Yeah, the tariff policy is bad.
Exactly.
I agree.
You've said that, so then you should agree that this would also not be that great, right?
No, this is exactly the opposite. The tariff policy is trying to stop people from doing, or individual firms in different countries from doing mutually beneficial economic arrangements. The tariffs get in the way of that. This is the opposite of that. This is saying, okay, do what you want, because that will be economically beneficial.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It directly contradicts the same policy. So the same.
Well, it's contradictory on Trump's part. Yes,
exactly.
It's contradictory
and
in the good way.
it's fascinating that we're trying to cut places off like China, which I know is totally different. Japan is an ally, but the way that we're treating foreign influences, just overall, even our allies in Canada with the tariffs, we are doing the exact opposite on one hand, and then just making the steel workers catch the brunt of a decision on the other hand. And people just want to know the details. They're murky at best. No one has any information, and steel workers deserve the right to know exactly what was agreed upon behind closed doors, since this affects them. It's not a special interest, it's American workers.
Yes,
and they should have transparency.
It affects us all, because steel is what builds bridges and homes and everything. And if you make it more expensive, everything in our lives will get more expensive.
And if people are getting pennies to build things in America because the union no longer feel that they have power.
No, unions get in the way of us building things, which is why we can't build anything in this country. That's what this whole abundance agenda is about. Remember how quickly we built the Hoover Dam and all those public works projects? Because we didn't have regulations and unions and all those things getting in the way and stopping progress.
And you remember why they were created? Because workers were being taken advantage of, paid too low, unlivable wages, right? These are reasons that they're created. So we can argue the good and the bad of things, but we need to make sure that workers are protected, right? Because this is a quote unquote America first, according to President Trump. So he just needs to be consistent. You ask for that in Democrats, you ask for that in everybody. Trump deserves to be consistent and transparent here. Like he says, I'm always accessible to the press. I always keep clear what I'm doing. This was unclear and just a decision that they felt made in spite of them, as opposed to alongside them.
I see it why I have some affection for our president, because when push comes to shove, he makes the right call.
He flip-flops.
As he did in this case.
Up next, President Trump is demanding the names and countries of international students at Harvard. But will he get them? We'll discuss. President Trump is railing hard against Harvard University. The president made a series of scathing posts on Truth Social over the weekend, and now he's demanding the names and countries of international students.
It's the latest in Trump's feud with Harvard. The Department of Homeland Security last week tried to block the university from enrolling international students. Trump writes, why isn't Harvard saying that almost 31% of their students are from foreign lands, and yet those countries, some not at all friendly to the United States, pay nothing toward their students' education, nor do they ever intend to.
Trump also said this shocking claim about these students. Let's watch.
Why would you not want the best and brightest from around the world to
I do.
come to Harvard?
I do, but a lot of the people need remedial math. Did you see that? Where the students can't add 2 and 2 and they go to Harvard. They want remedial math, and they're going to teach remedial math at Harvard. No, wait a minute. So why would they get in? How can somebody that can't add or has very basic skills, how do they get into Harvard? Why are they there?
So Harvard responded. They took to X to defend itself, saying, quote, without its international students, Harvard is not Harvard.
I don't know if it is true that way too many college students need remedial math and reading education. I don't think that's the international students. Just to put that out there.
He makes so many statements I can't keep up with the
Americans.
research that actually is true there. But
it is true.
He has this obsession with the wokeness of certain universities, and somehow he just picked out Harvard as the target to do this. And we really need to work alongside institutions as opposed to politicizing them. You know that Harvard and all other colleges are supposed to be a place for free speech, conversation. Exactly. So he's trying to stifle that in many ways instead of finding real solutions.
Oh, but
Look, I wanted to start with what I agree with. He did say that if he takes the money from Harvard, that he would like to fund trade schools. I'm actually open to that and agree with Trump in that way, that some of that money, or maybe not specifically Harvard money, but money can go to trade schools because a lot of people cannot afford or no longer want to go to a 4-year college and can do many things. So good point there. But on the back of Harvard, to me, is a bad point. I think that they have done much research, and he's pulling grants from students that have done extensive studies on cancer or heart health and things that are going to affect Americans across the board. And I think what he's doing is kind of derailing Americans from achieving the success we've had in the past with coming up with real solutions or ways to stabilize ourselves when we get sick, have illness, and have real conversations for the next world leaders. I don't know why he's trying to stifle that in any way.
A couple thoughts. I agree that universities should serve as bastions of free speech. The issue is, for instance, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, a nonpartisan public policy advocacy organization that actually ranks universities on how good their free speech policies are. This is not a conservative organization. This is an organization that's been unrelentingly critical of Trump and his speech policies. You know where they rank Harvard?
Where? What?
Dead effing last. Last place of hundreds of universities. So I think there's plenty to criticize Harvard for. I think not all the criticisms are fair, but many of them are. That said, and I am for, as a libertarian, I am for directing fewer public taxpayer resources to universities. And I think there is a fair criticism in saying where so much tax dollars benefits are going to this university that is disproportionately enrolling foreign students. It's not even enrolling American students. Why do American taxpayer dollars have to pay for a university that's enrolling a large number of foreign students?
You want the best and the brightest to come over here.
Let me finish.
Migrate.
I do want that. But I'm not going to ask Americans to pay for it. So my ideal solution that nobody likes, I don't want to pay for I won't tell you how to run your thing if I don't have to pay your thing. Your thing can be your way, and you pay for it, and that's fine. And my thing will be my way. I hate that we're getting this place in the country where everything must be forbidden or mandatory. Via government policy, whichever side wins, their agenda gets forced on all of us. I would ideally say, of course, Harvard University should take whatever students it wants. I don't have any problem with international students. In fact, I want the international students to come here and make our country better, and I want to drain China of smart engineers and those kinds of people, bring them all here. You know, I hate affirmative action. Harvard's entire undergraduate population is Indian or Chinese. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I don't care about protecting the spaces for Americans, just as I said with American workers in the last segment. I don't care. I just want the best and brightest people here and our whole nation to benefit from that knowledge. However, I will not ask American taxpayers to pay for it. That's the difference. So that's going to be the deal. And government perks come with strings attached. So because they get government perks, there will be scrutiny of this kind of nature saying, well, why is it so many international students if taxpayers are on the hook for it? So that's my solution.
So the news that just broke that Trump's going to sever all remaining federal contracts with Harvard. So during the show, he's actually going even further than he said he was going to do. And I think when we punish education, we're punishing America's future. And that's important to point out because Harvard has admitted that Harvard has flaws. Its president has said, yes, there's things that we can do better. We can do better to protect our Jewish students. They said many of things. And so I think that that's awareness to start to open the door for the conversation. There are 25,000 students amongst several different campuses at Harvard. And they're all going to be discussing dialogue. You're not going to agree with their stances. You're not going to agree with their protests. You're not going to agree with all the dialogue and the courses that are taught. But what does happen is a free exchange of thoughts and ideas that ultimately makes America a better place with a diverse group of people and thought processes so that we can have the best leaders in the world, the brightest, the smartest. And by trying to deteriorate an institution like Harvard, we're tearing apart something that we have built that's been great towards creating the next CEOs, creating the next doctors, creating multitude of roles. I mean, every company, you probably know somebody that came from Harvard that is helping to change and steer the direction. Just like I said, I support the trade schools. There's people that are coming and changing the world in those ways, but we can't try to tear apart something that we don't like. Like free speech doesn't mean you're going to like everything someone says. And that's part of the issue of why Trump is targeting Harvard.
Doesn't mean you should necessarily have to fund it. I mean, I think the value of Harvard is a little overstated. Obviously, it does have tremendous value, and I don't want to harm it, and I want it generally to enroll the students it wants to enroll. It's not wanting for financial resources. It's sitting on an endowment of like $50 billion. It's one of the wealthiest institutions there is. They could, maybe open, and then also you get into, so they enroll basically the same number of students. They haven't increased the number of students just overall that they enroll for decades and decades and decades. And they certainly have the resources to do that, but they want to keep it as elite and privileged, a tiny little club, because it has for their own financial interests and the growth of the alumni network. It matters to them that it is this very exclusive club. To the extent this is totally contrary to the idea of it as a public resource that government policy should give money to, when it treats itself like an exclusive club for the elite, increasingly not even the American elite, the international elite. And I think that is why it is not popular with Americans. Say what you will about this decision, which, by the way, I think the courts will get in the way of Trump being overly restrictive of the international students. And also, he's like, what are their names and who are they? Well, they do have to fill out all that information to qualify as an international student. The government is aware we have that information.
Imagine
the government
just trying to get your education,
and
Trump is asking for your name and,
we know that
and information
already, so
just to harass
that.
you.
We already have it. But my point is, I don't know what I was saying.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
But I just feel like it's like very targeted, and Harvard is really, just catching the brunt of all this. And they're like, whoa, what do you mean? Everyone was allowed to protest. Our country is built off of protests and then results from those protests. Like, what is this stemming from? From quote unquote wokeness? Like, he is attacking Harvard relentlessly, and they're like people that are just trying to get an education and change our country for the better. That's literally the goal.
There's a lot of bad stuff going on at Harvard students feel pressured. I've spoken to, this is just my opinion, when I used to do a lot more reporting on this, the law faculty at Harvard, law professors at Harvard spoke out, published an open letter protesting the Obama administration's dictates for their campus, how they would impact free speech at the university. So smart, liberal people have been concerned about many of the policies at Harvard for a long time. But I agree with you that protesting, as long as it's nonviolent and not overly disruptive in terms of we can't occupy public buildings or have permanent tent cities, other forms of protest are absolutely not only welcome, but they should be fully recognized by the university. And I do think some of the criticism I hear about Harvard, including from Trump on the whole anti-Semitism front, is a little needs to be litigated the way everything else is. Like, if it's actually happening, that's against their policies, and if they're ignoring it, they need to do something about it. But I don't know that that's an excuse for, shutting down the university in the same way that anti-black or anti-white or anti-male or anti-gay or anything else would be grounds for what the whole university has to have its procedures disrupted. It seems silly to me. Next up, Jake Tapper grills Mike Johnson over Trump's Memecoin dinner. Stay tuned.
CNN's Jake Tapper pressed Speaker Mike Johnson on Sunday over President Trump's dinner with investors of his Memecoin.
Trump recently hosted 220 holders of the Trump coin. The holders spent a combined $148 million to be there.
Let's watch Tapper and Johnson's exchange.
I really have a difficult time imagining that if this was a Democratic president doing the exact same thing, you wouldn't be outraged.
Well, look, I don't know anything about the dinner. I was a little busy this past week, as you know, getting the reconciliation package over the line.
Shouldn't we at least just know who was at the dinner? Wouldn't you want to know that list of people?
I guess. I mean, again, I don't know anything about that dinner.
Okay.
I do know that President Trump is the most transparent president in the most transparent administration probably in history. He has nothing to hide, and he's out there trying to advance America's interests.
Nicholas Pinto, a social media influencer who says he attended the dinner, told Fortune that people at the table said it was some of the worst food they've ever had. Senator Chris Murphy recently wrote on X, quote, "Trump's meme coin is designed to facilitate corruption. You can pay Trump secretly, which gets you a secret special access to the president. If Trump's dinner with the top coin buyers was legit, he would release the list of attendees. But it's so corrupt, so the list stays hidden."
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said at the news conference, "It's absurd for anyone to insinuate that this president is profiting off of the presidency. This president was incredibly successful before giving it all up to serve our country publicly."
I mean, there's something deeply unethical about a president promoting a meme and also creating all the laws and being the political power broker around the laws that are going to govern cryptocurrency, right? He literally is trying to profit off the same laws that he's creating. That is the textbook definition of conflict of interest.
I mean, he has a conflict of interest in that he's a businessman who is the president, but this is just, he's not profiting off of the laws. He has this
people
coin,
people
and
want proximity
people are
to power. No, they want
investing in
proximity
it or
to
buying
Trump.
in it,
So
and
people are buying proximity and access to President Trump, which is why people paid hundreds and thousands of dollars to be in the room with him. And then, like you saw people complain as well, barely get access. And so this, to me, is another scam on President Trump's behalf. We know we can go back to 2017.
So then you criticize it if they did get access, and you criticize it if they don't get access. If they do get access, you criticize it as being corrupt. If they don't get access, then they're being scammed.
People should not pay to play with our president of the United States. They shouldn't do that.
If they
he
do
shouldn't
what they
request
do,
that.
who cares? It's their money, and they did that, and they're like, "Oh no, it was a waste of my money." Well, sorry, I don't care.
History repeating itself. I can break it down to all the issues. One of the issues that is history repeating itself, remember Trump University? He was sued by 6,000 students in 2017 for scamming them the same way, taking about $35,000 per person if they enrolled in the whole university that wasn't accredited, and got information that you can just basically Google. So here he goes again when he knows that people want access to power because he has decision makings in cryptocurrency. So they'll buy his to benefit for the other investments that they have, which is almost feels like insider trading.
I think crypto, except it's totally out in the open. I think cryptocurrency is the future, and the Congress, not really so much Trump himself, but Congress is crafting rules around it. I think those rules should be as permissive as possible. I think increasingly with inflation and with the instability of our dollar, cryptocurrency is now it's not, cryptocurrency is not at all times stable compared to the dollar or other things. So get into it with caution, but it's your money, and you should be able to do what you want with your money. If you think that's a better investment for you, or that some of your money you would rather have in crypto assets, I know a lot of people like that. It's your choice. I think you should do what you want with your money, and then you can't come begging for a handout if things don't go your way and you take some risk. You gamble away the store. That's not my problem. That's not the government's problem. That's not society's problem. That's your problem. And I wish we approached more issues that way. But having some small number of your assets in crypto might be a good financial idea. And I think we need to let the market do its work. Let technology do its work, not over-regulate it. Make sure people are aware of what they're getting into.
You know who needs to do his work?
It's not even a left-right thing. Liberal celebrities have been pushing
But who needs to do their job and their work is Mike Johnson, right? He should look into this and
he
say,
is. If
who's
would leave him alone about
who's the list?
He know about.
He wants to. No, he did that job over the weekend, but people want to know the list of people that were attending there. You know why? Because some people on that list were Chinese billionaires, so they're buying access to our president. The same government that he berates all the time and can't stand and says he doesn't like. He wants to work alongside some of the most prominent, powerful, financially powerful people in that country who are buying his coin.
You know what he'd say? He'd say, well, if they want to give me a jet, they can give me a jet.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another scam. That's a whole nother topic.
He thinks we're a sucker to not gifts from other countries.
Yeah,
That's his
and I think we're a
ideology.
sucker for having foreign influence embedded throughout our government with Trump in office. That's what I think.
Right.
We are.
The position of Trump defenders is that it's not buying them any influence because he has his own views about all these subjects and he's not influenced by it. And he's actually not as susceptible as someone else would be because he's independently wealthy and successful as a businessman and has a million different ways to market Trump and the brand independent of this. And so it's not.
I mean, just because Trump is doing it out in the open, the argument is you can see everything that I'm doing. If you're still doing something that is unethical out in the open, does it make it not unethical? That argument is, to me, not legitimate. He's literally just throws pasta at the wall every single day, and it's an intentional thing that we can't focus on one policy or one major decision or one scandalous act because he does something else immediately later.
I think because it's crypto, people are presuming it's unethical when really it's just something new. But we can continue to monitor the situation for possible corruption.
I just want to know who was in the room, and then we can move on from this. Up next, Kristi Noem says, "Suck it." The reason why after the break.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem is taking a victory lap over the holiday weekend that sparked outrage and some praise alike. She posted on X, quote, "Suck it."
That post is in response to the dismissal of a lawsuit brought against the department by the ACLU and a group of 10 migrants who were contesting the Trump administration's use of Guantanamo Bay as a detention center for deportees.
While the MAGA faithful praised her unprofessional but direct post, the pearl clutching from the left was swift. Democratic influencer Harry Sisson saying in response, she's celebrating constitutional rights being ignored, how evil and depraved.
This comes on the heels of her disastrous Senate testimony last week, where she was unable to define habeas corpus. Look.
Last week you were asked about this, and I want to clarify your position because it's obviously really important to get this right. So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President
Habeas
Lincoln
corpus,
used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people.
I think the outrage over that clip was a little bit misguided. Kristi Noem was interrupted before she was able to fully respond. What she was going to push back on is say that habeas corpus is something that the government can and has suspended during times of emergency. It was suspended by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. Everyone.
Is that what she actually says, or that what you're finishing her sentence?
No, that is what she goes on. You can hear her saying Lincoln. She's being talked over. Everybody's favorite president, not my favorite president, but most people's, one of their top 3, suspended habeas corpus during a time of national emergency. Now, there are a lot of things we can argue about, whether this situation is the same, whether it is a national emergency. We can argue about whether it was even right for Lincoln to do it. I would argue no. I don't want habeas corpus, which is the principle that the government has to provide some reason for why it's detaining you. You can't just grab people and detain them. I think that's bad and is obviously tyrannical and is not a power we want our government to abuse in no matter how great an emergency we're facing, frankly. And we're not facing an emergency as dire as the nation being literally at war with itself as it was in the Civil War, and even then I wouldn't have done it. So I think it's fine to criticize her for that, but she wasn't, she was trying to push back on what whichever senator that was.
Well, I just think my issue with the whole thing, even her comments on X, is that this is a serious job. This is not a reality show. Her behavior is wildly unprofessional. It's not about clutching pearls. It's that you represent the United States in your actions, and so you have to take accountability with what you're posting. How is that appropriate? I think we're sending a message that the entire United States is unprofessional with the things that we do, like post pictures of the Pope with AI with Trump's face, or her writing "suck it." It's just not appropriate. And she has a pattern of unprofessional behavior that I like to point out. She has photo ops in front of shirtless people in jails to say, look at this. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, she's in El Salvador mega prison, kind of mocking people behind her that are detained. Like, why is that a photo op opportunity? Lead and make decisions, but do not use those people as, for your Instagram to make a point. She also, I want to point out, she also pointed a gun near a federal agent on another photo op. So she's literally, anybody that knows how to handle a gun would not have it pointed at a federal agent's head. And I think that she is wildly unprofessional and probably should think about correcting. And let's not just push it off as Trump's administration is real, authentic, and brash, because it's just unprofessional. And we should be able to call it that without saying, oh, we're clutching our pearls and being better than. No, we want our elected officials to be better than. We want them to lead and show the best of America, not the worst of it, right? This is not a good behavior. Would you want any other professional behaving like this? No. Would you want your boss behaving like this? No. Would you want people that make decisions based on your career or your lifestyle behaving like this? So why are we accepting it for her or Donald Trump?
I don't really care about the optics. I would want different policies, certainly, but you're discounting the fact that millions of Americans who are MAGA and who want harsher detention of illegal immigrants and a crackdown on crime, they love this kind of stuff. They love that it looks like the government is finally getting tough on crime and on illegal immigration. They love it. So you can say it looks unprofessional to you. That's your opinion, too. That's how you feel about it, and that's fine.
Before Trump also think this is
serious
unprofessional.
conservatives
Serious
before
conservatives
Trump. There's 3 of those. It's over. It's done. He won. He is the right. MAGA is the right. It's 50% of the country. They love this. They love this. I know you don't.
She spends her time dehumanizing people, mocking people.
They love it.
This is not appropriate,
but you can't
right?
Say it's not politically it's popular, bad politics, or unprofessional when people love it.
Don't use these things as a punchline, though. Make policies that the people will love then. But you don't have to do things that are inappropriate.
We're doing both.
Okay, well,
they
I don't
find
like
it appropriate.
I hate to see this for us. I want better for the American public. I want professionalism.
But that's just
the way that I
your
hold
view.
myself not to
That
a
is the
2-year-old
elite
standard.
That's the
same way I want my
view.
elected officials to not hold themselves to a 2-year-old standard, right? We're not in high school bullying people.
Okay, an increasingly small number of Americans feel that way, though, is all I have to say about that. That does it for us today on Rising, but please do make sure to also head over to our YouTube channel for more exclusive Rising content if you're not already there watching the show. Like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can find podcasts. See you back here tomorrow.